Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2018 NFC West Fantasy Preview. I'm Andrew Kirchhoff, and today, as I said, we're going to be talking about the NFC West. So let's get right into it. Hey, how's everybody doing? So if you've seen any of my prior videos, I've completed already 5 different previews, being the AFC and NFC South and the AFC and NFC North. 4 previews. There you go. I did another video on Andrew Luck. Kind of felt like another preview, but anyway. So this is our 5th preview, and again, we're going to go over the NFC West today. But until then, we're going to talk about my comprehensive rankings for the prior 4 divisions that I went over, and we're just going to talk about real quick the pieces that I've added from last week's AFC North. So in the quarterback division, we have Ben Roethlisberger at the last QB1 at number 12. And then we have, from the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously, and we have Tyrod Taylor, Andy Dalton, and Joe Flacco at 23, 24, and 26, rounding out the quarterbacks of the AFC North. My logic behind that, Joe Flacco last year did not perform. I don't see him doing well this year. Same thing with Tyrod and Andy Dalton. Tyrod's on a team where they didn't win a single game last year, and they won one the year prior. Can they turn it around? I don't know. Fantasy wise, Andy Dalton and Tyrod Taylor can both start in 2 QB leagues. So if you're in that kind of a situation, they're low end. For right now, that's where I've got them ranked. Until otherwise, I think there's a lot of talent left in this pool of quarterbacks. There's at this point in fantasy or just in the NFL landscape, almost every team has a capable quarterback that can win games, plain and simple, right? Usually there's a couple teams in the league where they have rookies that are just completely hopeless, or they have Josh McCown starting or Ryan Fitzpatrick. But this year it's a little different, and I'm thinking, what's up? What the hell was that about? Sorry about that, guys. I was like, what the heck's that? Someone's yelling in my house. Maybe I had to put on my cape and save the squad. I don't know. Anyway, so other than that, we're going to talk about a lot of the quarterbacks within the next 2 series previews that are going to fill out like the 14 and the 18 through 21. You'll kind of get a better idea of why I've dropped these quarterbacks rankings. Otherwise, Ben Roethlisberger, top 12. Watch last week's video. You get a better understanding. Running back wise, didn't really add much besides obviously Le'Veon Bell, the number 2 overall running back, and my number 2 overall player in my big board with all players ranked. So of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another player that we're going to go, let's see, what else did we rank? We have Alex Collins at 18. He's, as I said last week, I think he's going to be the number 1 running back of the Baltimore Ravens this coming season. There is Kenneth Dickson. There is Javoris Allen. But at this point, I don't have much fear of his job being taken from him, stuff like that. So no problem. What else do we have? Trying to remember what I've added. Joe Mixon at 23. We have Duke Johnson at 27. And we have Carlos Hyde at 36. So that's just, the basic rankings for right now. We'll watch last week's video to kind of get a better understanding of why I've placed them in different, in these specific spots. Otherwise, let's move on to wide receiver. Obviously, Antonio Brown. He is the consensus number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, just off of pure consistency, production, and opportunities. He's going to get thrown the ball 150 times a year, and he is Ben Roethlisberger's favorite target, and he is the best receiver in the NFL. Therefore, fantasy-wise, he has value. Another player within that division, A.J. Green, I ranked at 11. As I talked about last week, I don't like A.J. Green being the top receiver on a team. That's why I've kind of ranked him lower because, he's had injury problems. Andy Dalton is not consistent enough to get A.J. Green consistent fantasy points. So, sometimes when you're ranking receivers or running backs, it really just depends what they're surrounded with. due to the fact that Andy Dalton's his quarterback comparatively to if he had, Matthew Stafford as his quarterback. It's a big difference. Otherwise, AJ Green's a great talent, plain and simple. Let me see this. Anyway. Another receiver we added, Jarvis Landry at the 15 spot. I have Juju Smith-Schuster at the 19 spot. Josh Gordon from last week from the 22 spot. Michael Crabtree at 25. And yeah, that closes out the receivers of that division that are in the top 36. When it comes to tight ends, last week's division's pretty dry when it comes to tight ends. Going from the bottom up, Vance McDonald at 20 was at 8. Draft a top 5 quarterback, plain and simple. Hayden Hurst, 25. Draft a top 5 quarterback. David Njoku, 22. Draft a top 5 quarterback. What was I saying? Tight end. Draft a top 5 tight end. Excuse me. And who? And Tyler Eifert. Okay, so I put a little asterisk mark next to Tyler Eifert because at this point, his health is still in question. He's always had health problems, which, in fantasy and in the NFL, if you're, kind of a toss-up player, you can't be trusted. I put the asterisk there. If he's healthy, he can be up there within the top, maybe tight end 1 range. But for now, we're just going to put him there because of uncertainties. And that pretty much that ends our rankings for the prior 4 weeks. So let's just get into the NFC West, shall we? Let's begin with the Los Angeles Rams. So, real quick, about the Los Angeles Rams, right? This is the way I see it. In 2016, they were awful. We all know that. They were terrible. Their head coach, Jeff Fisher, doesn't know how to coach football teams anymore. That's why he was fired. He doesn't have a job anymore, and he's gone, right? Because he had this mentality of, we're just going to hand the ball off every down. We're not going to give Jared Goff the opportunity. We're going to start Case Keenum, and we're just going to be a bullshit team. And that's the result that they got, plain and simple. As soon as the head coaching change happened, Sean McVay, who was the offensive coordinator of the Redskins in 2016, was hired as the head coach for 2017 Rams. Everything changed. Besides just coaching change, it was a culture change, right? McVay brought in, obviously, himself to be the offensive coordinator. He brought in Wade Phillips to be the defensive coordinator. And they created a winning culture first year into it, right? Ooh, there it is. That will happen maybe once every 15 minutes. So if I keep this to an hour, we'll see like 4 times, okay? So no problem. Anyway, so obviously there was an entire culture change with the Rams, right? Second year into being the Los Angeles Rams, having Jared Goff start his first entire season. There's a lot of different things that the Rams did. They addressed a lot. They got a Pro Bowl left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, made a huge difference, right? They went and bolstered up their defense, made a huge difference last year. They went and traded for Robert Woods last year. They got Sammy Watkins last year. They created a winning scenario situation to surround Jared Goff with, right? Because Sean McVay, being the quarterback guru or quarterback whisperer he understands that if you can surround a young quarterback with pieces that can protect him and can give him opportunities to get the ball out of his hands as quick as possible, then you can have a winning situation. And then when you have Todd Gurley in the backfield, boom. I mean, just let the man go. He's an animal. Todd Gurley, we're going to go into it, but he's an animal. Anyway, so that's the entire thing about the Rams, right? The coaching change, the culture change, the acquisitions. Now, going into this coming season, right? They've acquired more defensively and offensively. It's going to make the Rams better. I mean, just in every aspect. So let's just talk about Jared Goff real quick, right? So in 2016, he wasn't given many opportunities. Case Keenum started over him for majority of the season. Maybe this last 6 or 7 games, Jared Goff started. And, there wasn't a team to surround him with. There weren't receivers. Todd Gurley was, subpar that season. Their offensive line wasn't, healthy, and there wasn't much talent, to be honest, on that offensive line. But in 2017, everything changed, right? The coordinator came in, built an offensive scheme around Jared Goff, around the plays he liked, around his strengths, not his weaknesses, which gave them the opportunity to not only pass the ball, Jared Goff, 3,800 yards, 28 touchdown passes, but it gave them an opportunity to run the shit out of the ball. And when you have Todd Gurley in the backfield, when you have Todd Gurley in the backfield, and plain and simple, defensive coordinators are completely losing their minds trying to scheme for this guy, it gives Jared Goff a lot of, gives him a lot of leeway, per se. He can play, risky, because as long as Todd Gurley's in the backfield and they can hand off the ball to him 20-something times a game, you're going to get, simple production, and it'll give Jared Goff extra opportunities here and there. So, last year, Jared Goff was a top 10 quarterback, but then again, Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers didn't play last year, right? Andrew Luck, shoulder surgery, and Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone last year, midway through the beginning, like the first quarter of the season. So where did that put Jared Goff? It obviously boosts him a little bit. Comparatively, I did this stat breakdown comparing Jared Goff to Tom Brady last season in 6-point per touchdown leagues. Jared Goff only averaged on a weekly basis 3 points less than Tom Brady, right? So when you're talking about Tom Brady, who's usually the consensus top 3 quarterback and future Hall of Famer, when it comes to fantasy, last year him and Jared Goff were only split up by maybe 40-something points, and if you divide that by 16 weeks, even though Jared Goff only played 15 games because they had already clinched the playoffs in week 15, you can break that down. It's 3 points per week. It's actually less because he really only played 15 games. So it's probably 2.7 points per week difference, right? So when you're talking about Jared Goff in a fantasy standpoint, yes, he could potentially be a top 12 quarterback this coming year. They're going to surround him with a lot more talent. They brought in Brandin Cooks. They still have a good offensive line. They've got Todd Gurley back there. The way I see it, so this is where we gets tricky, right? So last year the Rams were the highest scoring offense. They averaged 29.9 points per game. Okay, having an offense that's just completely crazy like that, there's going to be a little bit of regression in the following year. I don't see the Rams coming out lighting people up. If they do it, my God, then the Rams are 100% going to win their division, right? Because there's not much to kind of stop them within their division. So the way I see it, Jared Goff probably within my ranking system. Let's go back to my rankings real quick. He's probably going to be 14 for me, right? Behind Matt Ryan and, Big Ben Roethlisberger, because they've been doing it for multiple years. They're consistent throughout their entire careers. Jared Goff only in his first year starting last year, he showed up. Don't get me wrong, he showed up. But at the end of the day, I much prefer a kind of, I much prefer quarterbacks that have shown that they can do it over a long period of time, 7-8 years, comparatively to a quarterback that, in his first year came out, popped off, and, everyone's like, oh, Jared Goff. That's why I'm pulling the reins. Now, don't get me wrong. If you play in a 12 quarterback league, there's probably, a 12-team league, right, where everybody starts only one quarterback. Okay, let's get this correct. There's a potential for Jared Goff to start on a team. Someone might just say, okay, I'm just not going to draft a quarterback. Literally, I'm going to grab extra depth within other positions, receivers, tight ends, running backs, and I'm just going to take Jared Goff, and we're going to see what happens. It's not a bad strategy. In 2 QB leagues, he's extremely valuable because he is a top-end second quarterback, right? So if you can go and snag yourself a give or take Carson Wentz, which we haven't gone over, but if you can go grab yourself a Carson Wentz and grab yourself Jared Goff, your quarterbacks in a 2 QB league are set. They're going to start every week for you, except for bye weeks, obviously, and they're just going to, you're going to get consistent points. Plain and simple, his value is, he's got good value. In 2 QB leagues, he's way more valuable than in 1 quarterback leagues because there is so much depth within quarterbacks this coming year. So the way I see it, Jared Goff, man, I'm kind of rethinking this. Man, he's going to be good, but we'll see. He was top 10 last year, but then again, I'm telling you, there was no luck. There was no Aaron Rodgers. Matt Ryan had a little bit of a stumble year. That's why he's kind of dropped to 14. You'll understand. But anyway, so let's move on to the beginning piece that kind of the offense revolves around one person, right? Here in Los Angeles, and that's Todd Gurley. Okay. Oh, okay. So again, we talked about the Rams in 2016 just being lackluster. Their offense was not moving the ball. They were getting shut out left and right. Todd Gurley, he suffered, right? In 2016, he averaged 3.2 yards per carry, which is absolutely just terrible, right? The coaching change happened, the offense changed, and it opened up the entire world to being taken over by Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley last year was the MVP for fantasy, plain and simple. Out of all wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, Todd Gurley scored the most points by almost 70, right? If I'm not mistaken. You know what? I got to find that number because it's kind of funny how somebody could just outscore everyone by a clear amount, and it wasn't even close. Shall we? Yes. So Le'Veon Bell, right? The second best running back last year, had 299 points. And Todd Gurley, as you can see on the screen, had 351 last year. So he outscored the second best running back by 50 whole points. Now that's ridiculous, guys. That's absolutely crazy. Now, look at his stats 2017. A total of over 2,000 yards, all purpose, rushing and receiving, 19 touchdowns. I mean, this doesn't happen every year, plain and simple. There might be one running back, I remember in 2015, David Johnson did this kind of shenanigans where he was just complete. Oh no, it was 2016. 2016, David Johnson had these kind of numbers, right? Obviously, he got hurt last year, but the whole question is, can Gurley do this again? Is Gurley capable of scoring this many points? Obviously, 19 touchdowns is not a guarantee. You can't guarantee touchdowns like that, and that's what inflates his fantasy points, plain and simple, right? The yards, they're going to be there because of the attempts, right? Having almost 280 rushing attempts and being thrown the ball 75 times and catching it 64 times, that's incredible efficiency, and they're going to continue to feed him, right? So his yards are going to probably be within that kind of range. I mean, I remember there were a couple, receptions that Todd Gurley had last year, like one catch, 75 yards. That kind of increases his average by a lot. But at the end of the day, his production is there because his attempts are there and his opportunities are there. So being the number one option within the offense, Todd Gurley, in my opinion, is going to be the number one ranked running back going into the 2018 season. I think you'd be crazy not to take him number one overall because of the kind of upside he has, right? You see what he can do, right? There's no way he's going back to being the 2016 Todd Gurley. It's impossible, right? The offense is way better than it was in 2016. You have an offensive coordinator, you have a quarterback, you have a slew of receivers, right? Brandin Cooks, Robert Woods, you have Cooper Kupp, and then you have Tyler Higbee at tight end. You have so many other options that allows Todd Gurley to just reign free and take over this entire division, the NFC, the NFL. He is going to come out, he's going to destroy. Now, a couple stats I wanted to read. Todd Gurley only played 15 games last year, just like Jared Goff, right? In week 15, they guaranteed themselves the division win and the what's the word I'm looking for? They guaranteed a home game in the playoffs. So they thought, okay, why do we have to play anybody in week 16? That's fine. That's why. Okay, so real quick before we get there, if you're starting a league, make sure you don't have any playoff games in week 17, right? There are 17 weeks in the NFL. Each team plays 16 and has one bye week. Make sure there are no games being played in week 17 because of this sort of thing. If a team clinches a playoff spot, they will not start their players in week 17, and you will lose your fantasy championship. Therefore, you should never have a playoff finals in week 17. Okay? Anyway, so he played 15 games last year. In the 15 games he played last year, in a half-point PPR scoring, Todd Gurley averaged 23.42 points per game. In 15 weeks, 23 points per game, okay? Let's just put this into perspective. Todd Gurley is a monster, okay? He averaged more points than quarterbacks did, right? It's not that difficult to do so if you're scoring 19 touchdowns and you have 2,000 all-purpose yards. I mean, it's insane. Todd Gurley was a manimal last year. The way I see it, Todd Gurley should be drafted number 1 in a lot of your leagues. You know, if, let's say, for example, you're not a fan of Todd Gurley. You think, oh, there's got to be some regression coming, you know. There's no way he continues to be consistent. Well, good luck to you. Because if you don't draft Todd Gurley, you're going to regret it as the season comes by. I'm telling you, Todd Gurley, look, oh my God. He almost has, 4.7 yards average per rush? That's incredible. Being handed the ball off almost 300 times a season and just being able to plow through like that. He's an animal. He's young. He's got a... Okay, so real quick, his offensive line. Okay, they have Whitworth at left tackle. They have Stafford at left guard. They just re-signed their center. They have Havenstein at right tackle. And I think their right guard is up for debate. It's whoever wins in training camp kind of thing, right? The way I see it, they've got a really good young offense. When I say young, obviously Whitworth is like 35 years old, right? But he plays like he's 25. They have a good, consistent, I'm not going to say young anymore. They have a good, consistent offensive line that opens holes for Todd Gurley, plain and simple. Number 1 running back in the NFL, number 1 running back in fantasy. Draft him number 1 overall or regret it, plain and simple. All right, I don't want to talk about Todd Gurley for 20 minutes because I really could. Okay, so we're going to keep talking about Todd Gurley because who the heck is Malcolm Brown, right? Malcolm Brown is the handcuff. What's a handcuff? I'll explain it again if you haven't watched any of my other videos. Handcuffs are running backs that can only get kind of production if the starting running back of the team is injured. So if Todd Gurley was to tear his ACL right now, Malcolm Brown would be consistently given the 20 carries a game that Todd Gurley would usually get. Excuse me. Okay. So what kind of value does he have? None. No value. Okay. I only want to talk about this because last week we talked about James Conner being the handcuff for Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell has more he has more risk. He has more inherent risk, right? Le'Veon Bell has been busted for drugs. Le'Veon Bell has been injured before. Yes, Todd Gurley has torn his ACL in college, but that was a couple years back. He's way stronger. He's way faster. He's a monster. He's not going, oh, no, not the... Okay, anyway, the little thing popped up. Anyway, the way I see it, I'm still consistent in the idea that if you want, you can, if, like, let's say, for example, you play in a league where there's 20 rounds. In your 20th round, you can draft a handcuff like Malcolm Brown if you own Todd Gurley. If you don't own Todd Gurley, don't touch him. It's just going to take I'd rather go grab a rookie receiver, a rookie running back that has more upside. I don't want to try to bet off of an injury occurring. You understand what I mean? There's a specific thing in fantasy where if you're guaranteeing injury, unless it's Sam Bradford, which we're going to talk about in a couple slides, it's not worth it. You know, it's not worth it at all to take up a bench spot with a player that's not going to work out. Anyway, that's my thoughts on him. You would only draft him in the last round if you already own Todd Gurley. That's it. Excuse me. So let's go to the wide receivers, right? Okay, so number 1. The Rams this past season traded their first overall pick to the New England Patriots for Brandin Cooks. Now, Brandin Cooks, in 2016, he played for the Saints, right? He had a monster year. He was the number 1 wide receiver there, and he had just as good as numbers as Michael Thomas, right? Then the Saints had traded him for a first overall pick to the Patriots, right? He had a great year, and then they traded him for a first round pick to the Rams, right? So everybody's just on this 1 year and done kind of thing. Now let's be honest. Brandin Cooks is a monster. He is maybe I'm poised to say that he's probably in the top 5 fastest receivers in the NFL, maybe even top 3 at this point. His combine numbers can probably guarantee my stance on that. Last season, Brandin Cooks was the 12th ranked wide receiver, which made him a wide receiver 1. Going from Drew Brees to Tom Brady is a dream come true for any receiver, right? Especially a receiver with just as much talent as Brandin Cooks. So now that he's going to Jared Goff, don't get me wrong, he's no Brady or Brees, but he's got talent, and I'm 100% sure that he's going to have a wide receiver. He's probably going to have a kind of season that he had last year, right? But I see his receptions going up, 78 to 65. That's not very great. Losing receptions is not where I see him. I see him gaining more receptions, gaining more yards, maybe more touchdowns. But yeah, you know what? He might even be a wide receiver 1 this coming year. Sean McVay is pretty excited about Brandin Cooks. There's a reason why they went out and they traded for him, because they knew within our offense we need a receiver to go deep and just catch all the bombs. And he might be a wide receiver 1. We'll just have to wait and see. My rankings, Brandin Cooks might be a wide receiver 1, guys. I don't know. We'll see. Again, as I said before, the Rams last year averaged 29.9 points per game, right? So if they can I don't see them consistently doing that, but let's say, for example, it drops to like 24 points per game. That's still, a pretty decent, that's 4 touchdowns that are going to come on the board, right? At least 3 touchdowns, maybe a couple field goals, right? So of the 3 touchdowns, Todd Gurley is going to score 1. I'm assuming fucking Brandin Cooks is going to score 1, and then somebody else will pick it up. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. Anyway, he has potential to be a wide receiver 1 next year. Otherwise, he's a high-end wide receiver 2. I would prefer him as a wide receiver 2 within my team. I don't want him being my number 1 wide receiver because he is a deep threat, and with being a deep threat, there is a lot of potential for inconsistencies if you don't catch the deep ball. Anyway, let's go to the next wide receiver option of the Rams. Okay, broke my neck. Feels good. Robert Woods. Robert Woods, 2016, played for the Bills. Was drafted by the Bills, but then traded to the Rams of Los Angeles. Now, Robert Woods played at USC in college, so he was pretty much coming back home, which it's that's fun for a receiver, or if any player, coming back to where you spent majority of your prior career. Last season, Robert Woods, yes, only caught 56 balls, but he had 85 targets. That's pretty decent. When it comes to opportunities, he had his opportunities. Yard-wise, they weren't great. 781 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's not great stats, right? That's more of like high-end wide receiver. No, I think that's low-end wide receiver 3, because he was ranked 32nd within amongst receivers last year. So that means he started on a team, right? If he was the 32nd ranked wide receiver last year, and each team in your league starts 3 wide receivers, he started on a team, plain and simple, every week. And that's okay, but at the end of the day, there were better options, in my opinion, than Robert Woods on a weekly basis this coming year, because they've added Brandin Cooks. I see Robert Woods kind of having the same kind of production. The yards, the touchdowns, the receptions, I think they're going to be similar. And especially because, he had a 94-yard touchdown, right? There says they're long. That means that his stats are a little inflated, to be honest. And that was probably a touchdown. So his stats are a little inflated. The way I see it, he's a wide receiver 3 at best. He might even be a wide receiver 4 because of the addition of a 1,000-yard receiver like Brandin Cooks, and because of the next guy that we're going to talk about. Other than that, if you believe in the Rams passing game and you think that they're going to completely rip up on people, you could take a gamble and put Robert Woods on your bench, because I don't see him I don't know. If you play in a 12-team league and it's 3 wide receivers, he's going to start somewhere, but we'll see because there's a lot of when there's so many other options within the team. If there's a Todd Gurley and a Brandin Cooks, and then the next guy we're going to go over Cooper Kupp, who's really the second best wide receiver on this team, but he's kind of a slot receiver, so I put him at third. Anyway, so the way I see it, when there's so many mouths to feed, someone's got to take a production dip. I see it being Robert Woods, and it's going to happen. His production is going to dip a little bit this coming season. Okay, so real quick, Cooper Kupp. Remember this name, Cooper Kupp. He is Jared Goff's best friend on the field. Plain and simple, right? Todd Gurley, yeah, you can hand him the ball. You can pass him out of the backfield. He'll take care of you, right? But Cooper Kupp is Jared Goff's best friend. He was drafted to be Jared Goff's best friend, right? He's a receiver that, a little short guy, just like the Cole Beasleys and the Wes Welkers and the Julian Edelmans and Danny Amendolas. Short, small white dudes, right? That come out of the slot. And he's got a hell of a lot of talent. Last year, 62 receptions for 869 yards and 5 touchdowns, right? So he was the number 1 wide receiver within the Rams last year. And not by a lot, because Todd Gurley and what's his name? Todd Gurley and Robert Woods were kind of creeping on him. The way I see it, obviously the addition of Brandin Cooks opens up opportunities for Cooper Kupp to get open, have one-on-one matchups with linebackers. Being Jared Goff's best friend, you're guaranteed targets and you're guaranteed receptions and production. In my opinion, he's the second best wide receiver within this team. He was if I'm not mistaken, he was let's see. He had 94 targets, huh? 94 targets. Yeah, he's a rookie, so 30 of them got away from him, but it's okay. Cooper Kupp was if Robert was 36. Cooper Kupp was the 27th ranked wide receiver last year, right? Which makes him a wide receiver too as a rookie. If I'm not mistaken, he was the second best rookie in fantasy last year behind Juju Smith. The way I see it, his production is going to be even more this coming year. Yard-wise, probably similar. Touchdown maybe goes up. Definitely goes up. Receptions definitely go up. The way I see it, he's going to start on a team in your league. A lot of people don't know about Cooper Kupp. That's why I'm saying remember the name, because when it gets to your later rounds in your draft and you're thinking, okay, I need a wide receiver that can fill my wide receiver 2 spot because I went and I drafted running backs and quarterbacks earlier, whatever. I'm assuming you're playing in a 2 QB league because that's the way I play. But he's got great value. He's Jared Goff's best friend, and he's a part of an offense that really just likes to score a lot of points. What was that? Okay, real quick. So just so we understand real quick, I'm going to go back to I'm going to go back to Todd Gurley. So Todd Gurley last year had 64 receptions for 788 yards and 6 touchdowns, okay? 64, 788, and 6. Now, when we come back to Cooper Kupp, okay, Todd Gurley had more receptions, less yards, but more touchdowns. Todd Gurley is just as valuable as Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp was a wide receiver too last year. So imagine, not only are you drafting a running back that's going to get 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns just from running the ball, but you're getting a wide receiver kind of embedded into Todd Gurley that is just as valuable as a wide receiver too. Plain and simple, right? Todd Gurley's a monster, guys. That if you take anything from this video, Todd Gurley's a monster. Just draft Todd Gurley. Okay, the frames are kind of laggy, but it's okay. Todd Gurley. Okay, so Tyler Higbee. Okay, I'm glad I picked this picture because at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to say this. Draft a top 5 tight end. Plain and simple. It would be extremely beneficial for you to draft a top 5 tight end. It doesn't matter. Just draft a top 5 tight end. I'm going to do something real quick because I'm a little interested here. Give me a second. Elevator music cues in. I'm going to find something. Okay, perfect. I'm going to cover myself up, but it's okay. Just look at this real quick, okay? You know when I say draft a top 5 tight end, this is what I'm talking about, okay? So last year, Rob Gronkowski, the number 1 overall tight end, okay, scored 192.9 points in half-point PPR leagues, okay? Last year, in half-point PPR leagues, Julio Jones scored 207.9 points, okay? Now, the difference between both of them was only 15 points, okay? Now, on a 16-week, 16-game average, the per-week difference between Rob Gronkowski and Julio Jones was less than 1 point, okay? And Julio Jones was the 4th-ranked wide receiver, and Rob Gronkowski was the 1st-ranked tight end. I'm mumbling a little bit. The 1st-ranked tight end. So that's what kind of value you get within drafting a top 5. I mean, this is the number 1 overall tight end, right? But then again, Travis Kelce was only literally 1 point difference from Rob Gronkowski, and Zach Ertz was hurt many games, and he still scored like 180-something points. I'm telling you, top 5 tight ends have immense value. They cannot be, you can't even argue it. When you're putting up these kind of points, top 5 tight ends are even more valuable than receivers. Plain and simple, that's what I want you to take from it. Let's go ahead and just do one of these. Just throw this in the corner. Beautiful. Okay, so again, plain and simple, Tyler Higbee, no, he's not a top 5 tight end. Why? Because he's not going to get the targets. He's not as talented as top 5 tight ends, and he's really just not going to get much of the... Okay, I'm not going to touch that. He's not going to get much else than he did last year, right? 25 receptions, 300 yards, 1 touchdown. Okay, that's what I expect him to do this year, right? And you have to... Do not rely upon that. Do not draft Tyler Higbee, please, for the love of God. Unless Tyler Higbee comes out and starts grabbing 15 balls a game for 100 yards, then you can pick him up off waivers. Otherwise, we're not going to talk about him anymore. Okay. So, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy last season, Russel Wilson, right, of the Seattle Seahawks. So last year, the Seahawks, right? Let's just talk about the Seahawks in general. Last year, for the first time since Russell Wilson was drafted, the Seahawks didn't make the playoffs, right? Why? Why didn't they make the playoffs, Andrew? The Seahawks are great. Russell Wilson, as you just said, was the number 1 ranked quarterback in fantasy. He must have scored a bunch of points. He must have scored a bunch of touchdowns. Yes, he did. He did score a bunch of touchdowns. He did throw, 34 touchdowns and have. I'm going to read his rushing, stats in a little bit. But again, he did perform out of his mind last year. But why was that the case? Okay, number 1. Okay, the backfield of the Seattle Seahawks in 2017, the running backs were awful. Okay, the Seahawks thought, okay, let's go let's go and pick up Eddie Lacy, the guy that's literally 300 pounds. I'm going to wait. Literally 300-pound running back, and let's see if he can be our Marshawn Lynch. Didn't happen. He carried the ball twice for like 14 yards last year. Done. He'll never play it for another team again. If he does, I'm going to start applying to play running back for the NFL. I swear. Okay. Another running back, Chris Carson, which we're going to go over a little bit later. Last year, tore his ACL, boom, out for the season. Okay. Then they had CJ Prosise, who's receiving back, and then they had some other bums that just couldn't cut the slack. There was no top running back of the team, and it didn't help. Right? It always put the Seahawks in 3rd and long situations, and Russell Wilson either had to use his feet or his amazing arm to carry the team, and that's what he did last year. Plain and simple. His offensive line was lackluster. He was probably, if I'm not mistaken, the top 5 from being most sacked quarterbacks from last season. His offensive line was pathetic. They may have even been worse than the Giants' offensive line last year, and the Giants' offensive line was horrendously terrible. Midway through the season, they traded for DeJuan Brown from the Texans, and he's a left tackle, so it kind of gave Russell Wilson a little bit of protection on the blind side, and obviously that helps as it comes into this coming season. The way I see it, so real quick, his stats, right? He scored 451 points. Now, comparatively to quarterbacks last year, yes, there wasn't Andrew Luck. Yes, there wasn't Aaron Rodgers, right? But at the end of the day, he put up points that nobody really ever puts up, right? You know what? That's a mistake. Okay, disregard 451. It's 415.92. Mistakes were made. I was about to say, I was like, 451. Okay, that's a mistake. We're going to go ahead and just do this real quick. Let's go and do this. Nothing happened. Okay, so he scored 415 points last season. Okay, 415 points. Obviously, almost 4,000 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, and then he had 586 yards rushing and 3 rushing touchdowns, right? That makes all the difference, right? Because the second highest points per quarterback and 6-point per passing touchdowns last year was Tom Brady at 360 points, right? So Russell Wilson has a 55-point difference between him and Tom Brady because of those rushing yards. Those rushing yards they make such a huge difference when it comes to quarterbacks. That's why Cam Newton has so much value. That's why Carson Wentz has so much value. That's why Alex Smith has so much value. It's because they're not afraid to run. And they get yards and they get production, they get touchdowns running the ball. Like, let's say, for example, right? So Cam Newton had 750 rushing yards. Alex Smith last year, 355 rushing yards. Carson Wentz, 300 rushing yards. These kind of rushing yards, they're the reason why your quarterback will score more points. Yes, they're not pocket passers. They might not throw as many touchdowns, but at the end of the day, they're going to score more fantasy points. And that's where value, kind of resides, in rushing yards. Because when we, stat out fantasy, right? Quarterbacks generally get 1 point per 25 passing yards, obviously because they throw for thousands of yards a season. But when you run the ball as a quarterback, you are just treated like a running back. 1 point for every 10 yards. So when you rush for almost 600 yards, you're getting 60 points, and then you're getting your touchdowns. Which he got 3 touchdowns, so that's another 18. So he got 78 more points. He got 78 points just off using his legs. And, that's crazy. The way I see it this coming year, they drafted a running back. His offensive line's better. He's going to throw the ball more. And the way I see it, I don't think he's going to have to put the team on his back as hard as he did last year. There's a chance he might have to, but that's why I'm going to rank him at my number 2 as when it comes to quarterbacks in fantasy this coming season, right behind Aaron Rodgers. So, and again, real quick. So the weapons that surround Russell Wilson, they're not great, and they're not really getting better, right? So Doug Baldwin's still there, but they let Jimmy Graham go. Jimmy Graham's gone. He's on the Packers now. Paul Richardson's no longer there. Paul Richardson is on the Redskins. And those are 2 receivers that they used exclusively a lot in the red zone. So we're going to talk about the pieces that are going to surround Russell Wilson. But again, that's why I see him at the number 2 ranked quarterback instead of the number 1. Otherwise, I'd been happy to give him the number 1 ranked quarterback spot for the 2018 season. So, the running back out of San Diego State University, Rashaad Penny. Okay, so let's talk about Rashaad Penny. He was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks to be the number 1 running back for the organization, plain and simple. The way I see it, Rashaad Penny, look at his stats real quick, okay? His senior year out of SDSU, he had 2,200 rushing yards. 23 touchdowns, okay? That's, oh my God. That's crazy, right? So I went and I was like, oh my God, this guy must have been like the most rushing yards in all of NCAA last season. I'm sure of it, right? I went and watched his film. His competition wasn't great, right? He played like Air Force. He played small schools, right? That, don't have great talent. They don't have NFL caliber talent. They play like Nevada, schools like that, right? Yes, they have their own, specific talent, but they're not Alabama's defense, right? Having to go against an SEC defense every week is a different story, right? So, but then I really looked at the way he ran the ball. He's got incredible speed. His ball carrier vision is maybe the best I've seen in a while. He's able to just grab the ball and on a dime evaluate the entire line and find the hole and go. Right? When it comes to translating to the NFL, Rashaad Penny, a lot of people are going to think this guy's going to be an RB2 this coming season. I can see him being an RB2, but don't draft him higher than that. Don't think he's Saquon Barkley, right? Yes, he's being given the reins to run this backfield, plain and simple, right? There's no other talent in this backfield to compete with Rashaad Penny. But don't be like a lot of the analysts last year and thought, oh, Joe Mixon, he's going to be an RB1. He has to. No. Don't confuse yourself with the opportunity and he was good in college kind of thing. Because, well, okay, let me gather my thoughts real quick. The way I see it, plain and simple, he should be treated as an RB2 this coming season. If he produces more than that, great. But don't draft him any higher. There's so much talent on the board that I'd rather get guaranteed stats than risk it on a rookie that I don't know how he's going to pan out. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm going to say he's probably going to be in that RB2 range, around Alex Collins' range. Don't draft him higher than that. Unless you're like an SDSU fan and you love the Aztecs, just relax, take it easy, and try to win your league by not overpaying for specific talent, okay? Other than that, he's got an opportunity to be he's got an opportunity to start on a weekly basis and get consistent points. He's going to do it, but don't overpay for this guy, okay? Excuse me. All right, we're going to talk about Chris Carson, like I talked about earlier. Chris Carson last year was a rookie. I think it was after 4 games. I think it was 3.5 games in. He tore his ACL, and he had decent, stats, right? Going in 3.5 games, 208 yards rushing, 59 yards, almost 60 yards receiving, and a touchdown. He had pretty consistent yards. He was like a 10-point per week kind of guy in half-point PPR, which was pretty decent. And the way I see it, Chris Carson, does he have potential this next year? Kind of. He's coming off of a big injury, and he's not going to be the starter. So where does his value reside? Handcuff. He is a handcuff to Rashaad Penny. If anything happens to Penny, then Chris Carson gets the value because we know that he can produce because he did it for a good amount of time last season until he was hurt. The way I see it, other than that, he is a handcuff, and he should be treated and drafted as such, plain and simple. Don't want to, go too much into it. That's it. Okay, so we're going to talk about Doug Baldwin. How long have we been doing this? 47 minutes, and I'm only on the second team. My God, I got to hurt. Okay, we're not going to okay, here we go. So Doug Baldwin, last year, production dipped, plain and simple. Why? I don't know. I literally have no clue why his production dipped, except for the fact that he just either dropped a bunch of passes or Russell Wilson was just throwing up ducks, right, because the pressure was hitting him. In 2016, he produced like he usually does. The way I see it, where's Doug Baldwin? He's guaranteed to be a wide receiver too, right? He was last year with the stats. So he has guaranteed wide receiver 2 stats, and he's going to get guaranteed production because he's Russell Wilson's best friend, right? They got rid of Jimmy Graham. They got rid of Paul Richardson. He is the best receiver on this team. And, he's really good, plain and simple. So he's a wide receiver too. I would love to have him on my team as my second wide receiver if I went and drafted, like, for example, I draft running backs early back-to-back, and then I go pick up, like, Mike Evans and Doug Baldwin. I'm happy, right? Because I have my number 1 wide receiver and I have my number 2 wide receiver, and they're going to consistently score on a week-to-week basis because Doug Baldwin is going to get his opportunities, plain and simple, because Russell Wilson loves his Doug Baldwin. He's going to feed him. Plain and simple. I don't want to talk about it anymore because I've already been too far into this. This is a long-ass video already. Other than that, yes, his receptions dipped a little last year. His offensive line is going to be better this year. They're going to have a running game. It's going to open up opportunities for Doug Baldwin to score more fantasy points. Look at this. So comparatively to 2016, right? There's not that much of a point difference. Right? Okay, it's 23 points in 16-week average. It's like 1.4 points per week difference. Not a big deal, okay? Plain and simple. Let's just move on. He's going to be good until Russell Wilson leaves this team or until they cut Doug Baldwin. So just Doug Baldwin's wide receiver too. Plain and simple. I'm not going into it anymore. Okay, bum and Marshall, right? Bum ass Brandon Marshall. Okay. Oh man. 2016 he was a bum. 2017 he was a bum until he got hurt. The way I see it, the Seahawks thought, okay, let's pay this guy that's been on maybe, I think this is his 6th NFL team. Let's pay this guy $12 million for 1 year, because not only do we not trust him, but because he's old, right? He's been in the league for a hell of a long time. I think this is his 12th year in the league. The way I see it, in 2015, Brandon Marshall had the best season of his career, in my opinion. In 2015, right, not too long ago, he had 1,500 receiving yards and 14 touchdown receptions, right? And that was with Ryan Fitzpatrick as his quarterback. Does Brandon Marshall have, potential to score a lot of fantasy points this year? Sure, there's potential, because they got rid of Paul Richardson and they got rid of Jimmy Graham. Those are two bigger targets that Russell Wilson liked to throw to. And if Russell Wilson is going to throw for 4,000 yards and he's going to throw 30-some-odd touchdowns, then Brandon Marshall is going to be there to collect them. The way I see it, I don't like Brandon Marshall because of his, the fact that he's been in the league for so long, the fact that he's coming off of 2 years of just being total garbage, being injured last year. It doesn't look like it's culminating to be something great. But at the end of the day, there is potential. That's all I'm going to say. There's potential. If he acts upon it, then so be it. Otherwise, he should probably be drafted to be put on your bench. Plain and simple. Draft him to put him on your bench. That's it. Okay, Tyler Lockett. I'm not going to go into this too much. He's like a Ted Ginn. He can potentially start for your team later on in 12-team, 3 wide receiver per team leagues, maybe even 16-man leagues. He can start, but then again, he's a matchup-dependent kind of guy. He's not getting peppered with targets, and he's kind of the deep threat of the team. The way I see it, not much value, kind of a handcuff situation there. I'm not going to really go into it any more than that. I'm just going to go, like Russell Wilson, Rashaad Penny, Doug Baldwin, maybe Brandon Marshall. Those are the 4 vital pieces when it comes to fantasy of this Seattle Seahawks team. Ed Dickson. Last year, Greg Olsen, as you can see, he was on the Panthers last year. Greg Olsen broke his foot or whatever the hell, and Ed Dickson was given an opportunity. He played decently, right? There were a couple weeks where he was good, and then there was a couple weeks that you picked him up off waivers, and he was 2 points, and he was garbage. The way I see it, Russell Wilson does like his tight ends, but how much talent is Ed Dickson, right? Not too much. I wouldn't put too much stock into him. I would say draft a top 5 tight end. If your volume was up, I'm sorry. Other than that, draft a top 5 tight end. Let's move on. Okay. Man, we took a long time to get through those first 2 teams. We're going to go quick. Hey, okay. All right, that's the go. Sam Bradford, 2016, was it? Okay, so let's put it this way. Let's not even go over 2016, 2017. Sam Bradford is good in 2 quarterback leagues. Plain and simple. If you don't play in a 2 quarterback league, you can go ahead and click on the timestamp on the bottom in the description of this video and click on to Josh Rosen, okay, or to David Johnson, okay. Other than if you don't play in a 2 QB league, you have no worry about Sam Bradford. Don't even think about Sam Bradford. He doesn't exist if you don't play in a 2 QB league. Okay? Now, if you do play in a 2 QB league, let's go over this real quick. 2016, he was a decent quarterback 2 in a 2 QB league. Decent. He had good yards, good touchdowns. It was decent, right? He could start for your team. Last year, he played 1 game, and then his knee gave out, and he never played again. Case Keenum, in that 1 game he played, the season opener against the Saints, 382 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 124.4 passer rating, 75% completion. I even owned him. He sat on my bench week 1. I was like, okay, whatever, it's fine. We'll start it next weweek, right? Next week came along. He has an injury. He never played again. I dropped him in week 14 while I cried, okay? Don't bother me, okay? Leave me alone. Sam Bradford. Unless you play in a 2 QB league, he doesn't have much value. The way I see it, with the amount of knee injuries this man has sustained in his entire career, I don't see him playing the entire season. Okay, the offensive line is not that good. They traded Jason Valdir, the left tackle that's been on this team for the last 6 years. They traded him to the Broncos. I don't know who's going to protect this. Mike Iupati's still there, right? The left guard. I don't know who's going to protect Sam Bradford. He's got some, very gentle legs, and if he gets hit, we're going to have problems, plain and simple. If you don't play in a 2 QB league, don't worry about it. If you do, stay away from Sam Bradford. Okay, Josh Rosen. There's a reason why they drafted this kid out of UCLA, right? Because they know for a fact that Sam Bradford's not going to last. He's older. They have Mike Glennon as the third-string quarterback. Get him off the team. You're paying him too much. And you have Josh Rosen that is probably going to get some reps this year. He's going to start a couple games here and there because of Sam Bradford's injuries. You know how I always say, don't guarantee injuries. I can guarantee it for Sam Bradford and Sam Bradford alone. That's it. That's all I can do. I've seen the Magic 8 Ball, and I've seen into the future. And Sam Bradford will not play the full season. If you play in a 2 QB league, Josh Rosen maybe has potential. You can pick him up in the last round of your draft and just stash him. In a 2 QB league, okay? That's it. Okay. Now, let's get to the bread and the butter, baby. Whew. The bread and butter. Okay. David Johnson, right? Last year, in the first half of the first game of the season, he had 10 points. Then he broke his wrist, and he was out for the entire season, right? Because they didn't want to rush him back. They didn't want to have him run around with a cast. They said, forget about it. It's okay. You're done for the season. We'll hold you. You're a young, strong player. We'll hold you back, and then 2018 you'll come back and just rip up the league. So what I want to talk about is in 2016 what David Johnson accomplished. David Johnson had better stats than Todd Gurley did this past season. Remember, Todd Gurley had 19 touchdowns. David Johnson had 20. Todd Gurley had 64 receptions, and David Johnson had 80. Todd Gurley had just about 2,000 yards total. David Johnson had 2,100 yards total, right? The way I see it, David Johnson, 2016, if you can get that guy back, if you can somehow get David Johnson back to 2016 form, just even a little bit worse, who cares? That's fine. 300 points in the year, right? Be like Le'Veon last year. Then he's going to be a top 5 running back in fantasy, plain and simple. The way I see it, he has talent that surrounds him. There's good quarterbacks on that roster, right? Sam Bradford can throw a nice 5-yard pass, and David Johnson could take it. And so can Josh Rosen. But at the end of the day, what David Johnson are we getting back? It's only a wrist injury. I don't see it affecting him much. I think we're going to get David Johnson back, but there's just a little bit of concern. The way I see it, I would probably say he's the 4th best running back in fantasy because of his potential to catch 80 balls in a season. 80 receptions. 80. Almost 900 receiving yards in 2016. He's a monster. He was a 2016 MVP of fantasy. Look, just think about that, right? In 2016, the MVP of fantasy was a running back. In 2017, the MVP of fantasy was a running back. Case closed. Case is closed. Plain and simple. Draft a running back in the first round. If you have the 4th overall pick, yeah, you can either take David Johnson, you can take Antonio Brown, or you can take Ezekiel Elliott. In my opinion, David Johnson is going to definitely score more than Antonio Brown, and he's going to have way more receptions and receiving yards than Ezekiel Elliott. That'll give him the advantage. Therefore, in my opinion, he's going to be the 4th ranked running back in fantasy in 2018, in my rankings at least. Plain and simple. Other than that, David Johnson is a monster. I don't know how much else I gotta, sell you on it, but the way I see it, he's going to be the 4th best. In PPR, he's even more of a monster, right? This is half-point PPR scoring. In PPR, imagine 80 receptions on top of the fact that you're rushing for 1,200 yards and 16 rushing touchdowns. Imagine. I'm telling you. It should be Gurley, Bell, Kamara, Johnson. Okay? That's my rankings. If you like David Johnson more because you're from Arizona, sure. Okay. I'm going over these. Handcuff. Done. He's a handcuff. Elijah Penny, handcuff. Done. Larry Fitzgerald. Oh my goodness, Larry Fitzgerald. Whew. Okay, so this guy, Larry Fitzgerald, is 34 years old this coming year. Yet he's still producing like a monster. Okay, so let's put it this way. Last season, if I'm not mistaken, let's go to wide receivers in my little stat thing. Larry, where are you, Larry? Larry Fitzgerald was the 6th best wide receiver in fantasy and half-point PPR last year. Guys, oh my. He was the 6th best receiver in fantasy last year. And he was 34 years old. Okay, so let's just go over this real quick, okay? Because I really just want to look it up, actually. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, the Arizona Cardinals had a slew of quarterbacks last year, and it was embarrassing. Okay, so they had if I'm not mistaken, they had, I think Carson Palmer started last year for a little bit, and then they had Blaine Gabbert for a couple games, and then they had and then they had Drew Stanton, and then they went back to Gabbert. I mean, there was nothing elite about the quarterbacks that were on the roster for the Arizona Cardinals last year. Plain and simple. There was nothing elite about them, right? As soon as Carson Palmer went down, the entire thing was done. Yet, even with that, Larry Fitzgerald had better stats than he had in 2016. How? How does this guy get better? Let me tell you how. Because he's a monster. He's a future Hall of Famer. And the way I see it, he's going to produce similarly to last year. He's going to be, hold up. Where's my rankings? I might have to move some people around. Because the way I see it, he's probably a low-end wide receiver 1. Probably 11 or 12. Right? Yes, I don't want to guarantee. Not guarantee. I don't want to rely upon a 35-year-old man to be my number 1 wide receiver. I don't want to do that, right? But at the end of the day, you might have to. And it's not going to be a big deal because if you play in PPR leagues, he's perfect. Because 109 receptions, 107 receptions, that's golden. Now, if you don't play in PPR, don't talk to me because PPR is king. Okay, J.J. Nelson. Played for the team the last couple of years. Look at his stats, okay? 500-something yards. The way I see it, unless you're playing in a deeper league, he won't be on any teams. And if you play in a deeper league, he's going to sit on your bench, and he might get played into good matchups. Other than that, he's handcuffed to Larry Fitzgerald. Okay, Christian Kirk out of Texas A&M. Drafted in the first round. No, not in the first round. I don't remember. I think it might have been second or third round. I think it might have been fourth. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's regardless. He's a young talent, good wide receiver. And at the end of the day, I think it really just depends on quarterback-wide receiver relationship on how he develops. He's going to be taught by Larry Fitzgerald to be really good. And when you have a receiver like that, that's so knowledgeable and so much of a leader that he's going to teach all the young receivers around him how to be better, then I feel like these kind of receivers like J.J. Nelson and Christian Kirk can be way better than they're going to be way better than we think. But I think at the end of the day, because of the uncertainty of quarterback, there's just a little bit of a question mark. Okay, Ricky Seals-Jones. Okay, so the starting tight end of the Arizona Cardinals is technically Jermaine Gresham, but he's a blocking tight end, right? Ricky Seals-Jones used to be a wide receiver in college, and now he's a tight end in the NFL. He came on in the last couple games of the season, and he had pretty good stats, right? The receptions are not there, but he's a tight end again. If you get 4 per game, that's great. 200 yards, great. 3 touchdowns, great. Plain and simple. He had good yards at the end of the season last year. He started for a couple teams in leagues that I was in. But at the end of the day, the way I see it, draft a top 5 tight end. That's it. I can't really say anymore. Okay, so our last team. We're an hour and 5 minutes in, and we're only our last team. And I blew through the Cardinals. Real quick, before we move on to 49ers, I want to go over Cardinals again, just like a brief thing. Don't trust in Sam Bradford because he gets injured. Josh Rosen should only be picked up in 2 quarterback leagues. David Johnson's the 4th best running back in the NFL when it comes to fantasy. Larry Fitzgerald is going to be a wide receiver 1 next year. And everybody else is irrelevant. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the 49ers, the last team of the NFC West. Okay, so Jimmy GQ Garoppolo, Galapagos Islands. Okay, so he was traded over from the Patriots to the 49ers last year for a second-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. My God. Jimmy Graham is great. Jimmy Garoppolo, you mean, Andrew, right? Yes, that's what I meant. It was a Freudian slip. Jimmy Garoppolo is great, the way I see it. Unless, okay, so here's the thing, right? Mike Shanahan is the offensive coordinator and the head coach of the 49ers, right? Mike Shanahan was the offensive coordinator of the Falcons when they had that Super Bowl run in 2016, when they were ripping up on people, right? When they averaged 32-point-something points per game, and Matt Ryan was the MVP, and Julio was a monster, and all the other receivers and running backs were just scoring points up the wazoo. So that's what he has as his offensive coordinator, right? So there is potential that because, Jimmy Garoppolo's had a little bit of experience last year and coming into this year, that he's going to be a good quarterback, right? This is the way I see it. Jimmy Garoppolo started for 5 games last year for the 49ers, and he won every single game, right? His stats weren't great, but at the end of the day, he won games, right? So we know he's good enough to start and win games as a quarterback. Now, will the fantasy kind of aspect come in, and will he produce? I think there's a good chance that Jimmy Garoppolo can be a good quarterback in a 2-quarterback league. I think I trust him more than Marcus Mariota because I know that he's a pocket passer. I know he has a better offensive coordinator. Yes, the pieces that surround him aren't great, but they're good enough for him to produce with. If you play in a 2 QB league, he's a good second quarterback option, plain and simple. Yes, he plays in a tough division, having to play Cardinals defense, a Rams defense, and a Seahawks defense twice a year each. That's difficult, but I think Jimmy Garoppolo can produce, and he showed it last year that there's little. I mean, even in 2016, when he had to start a couple games when Brady was suspended, he showed some glimpses of being a really good quarterback, and there's a lot of potential this coming year. But I think he's going to be a QB2, a high-end QB2 at that. But he's going to be decent. We'll see. So let's move on to the running backs, because I don't want to keep us here for 2 hours, shall we? Okay, Jerrik McKinnon. So he played for the Vikings last year, as you can see without the jersey, right? It's kind of hard to talk about Jerrik McKinnon without talking about the Vikings, right? So last year, Dalvin Cook got injured, and Latavius Murray and Jerrik McKinnon took over the reins of being the starting running backs for the Vikings. Last year, he produced. 570 rushing yards, 421 receiving yards, 5 total touchdowns. That's pretty good stats. Plain and simple. That's if I'm not mistaken, let's check, because there's always a good idea to fact check yourself while the camera resets. Okay, let's check here. Okay. Comparatively to Christian McCaffrey, okay? Christian McCaffrey had 435 rushing yards, 651, and 7 touchdowns, right? So overall stat-wise, I'm looking at it. Overall stat-wise, Christian McCaffrey, literally the only difference between him and Jerrik McKinnon was 2 touchdowns and 80 yards total. So Jerrik McKinnon last year was a running back too, and for majority of the back half of the season, he was great. This offseason, he was signed by the 49ers because Kyle Shanahan 100% believes that by adding Jerrik McKinnon to the weapons of the 49ers, he can be an extremely vital Swiss Army knife for this offense. He can run the ball. He can receive the ball. He can do just about anything. He can line up at slot. He can line up outside. He's a great enough receiver to do that. And I see it because of the fact that Kyle Shanahan is such a good offensive coordinator. He's going to find a way to make Jerrik McKinnon, who's never really been a starter for any team. He's really been the third round. He's been a third down running back for the Vikings for the longest time. he can make Jerrik McKinnon into a really good high-end RB2, maybe middle of the pack RB2 for this coming season, plain and simple. Okay, so Matt Breida. Okay, so last year, Matt Breida was a rookie. They brought him in. He rushed for a good amount of yards, plain and simple, right? He had 93 fantasy points last year, and with already having Carlos Hyde there last year, he took his opportunities and he flourished pretty well. The way I see it, Matt Breida this coming year is not going to be the starting running back. He's going to get his opportunities here and there, but at the end of the day, he's a handcuff to Jerrik McKinnon because you wouldn't want to pay Jerrik McKinnon $20-some-odd million to come in if you're not going to give him the starting spot and if you could just do it with Breida. So therefore, Breida is going to be the handcuff to the McKinnon situation in the 49ers backfield. Okay, so Pierre Garcon, okay, real quick. In 2016 when he played for the Redskins, Pierre Garcon was really good, right? 79 receptions, 1,000 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was good. That's really pretty good stats, right, with Kirk Cousins. Last year he was brought in. Okay, so real quick, let's go over this. So in 2015, okay, Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator for the Redskins in 2015. Then he went to the Falcons, and now he's with the 49ers, okay? And it's funny because in 2016, Sean McVay was the coordinator for the Redskins, and now he's with he's the head coach of the Rams. So somehow the coordinators of the Redskins are becoming head coaches, plain and simple. I think it may have been Kirk Cousins making everybody look good because I like Kirk Cousins, but at the end of the day, anyway, last year, Pierre Garcon was a wide receiver too until he got injured. The way I see it this coming year, he's definitely going to be a wide receiver too because he's the best wide receiver on this team, and he's a reception kind of guy. And when you have Jimmy Garoppolo there and the offense is kind of surrounded about just passing the ball a fuck ton of times, it's just going to work. It's going to work, plain and simple. The next receiver, Marquise Goodwin. Okay, so something about Marquise Goodwin. Last year at the back end of the season with Jimmy Garoppolo, they started to put together some good stats, right? In 3 games with Jimmy Garoppolo, the first 3 games that they played together, right? They had 319 receiving. Okay, so Marquise Goodwin had 319 receiving yards on 24 receptions, right? That's great targets because I'm sure it was 30-something targets, 24 receptions, 300 yards in 3 games. That's 10 points per week on average, maybe even more because of PPR. So it's more per week. Actually, it's 14 points per 12, 13, depends. Points per game on average with Jimmy Garoppolo last season. Is he going to do the same this year? Marquise Goodwin is a deep threat. He is a speed receiver. Yes, he's the wide receiver 2 on the 49ers. He's going to be on a team within your league. Does he have great value? I'd much rather have Pierre Garcon, even though Garcon's age is catching up with him. As we can see with Larry Fitzgerald, sometimes it just doesn't affect some people. Even though, I like Marquise Goodwin. Don't get me wrong. I would like him on my bench. I don't want him to start. If I can get him for bench value, then great. That's all I can say. If I can get him for good value and he can sit on my bench and he can play into specific matchups, because as of right now, I don't want to play receivers against the Rams defense, right? And having to play the Rams twice a year, that's difficult, right? So let's say, for example, because of the fact that the Rams have Aqib Talib and they just traded for Marcus Peters, and then now they have that ridiculous defensive line with Ndamukong Suh and Michael Brockers and Aaron Donald. I don't want to play receivers or much less anybody into that defense right now. So that kind of shit scares me. But if I can have him on my bench and I can play him into better matchups, like matchups against the Packers or matchups against the Lions, teams with that want to play shootouts with you and just throw touchdowns, who can score more, then I'll play him. Otherwise, he's a wide receiver 3 kind of player. Oh my goodness. Okay, real quick. Before we end this video, because we're coming about 1 hour and 15 minutes. right here, whatever's on the screen, up there, this guy. Oh my goodness, whatever. George Kittle, the tight end for the 49ers. There is another tight end, Garrett Selleck. The way I see it, the 49ers and their tight ends should not be relied upon. I don't like 49ers tight ends. I don't like fantasy tight ends that aren't top 10. Draft a top 10 tight end, please. Please. You know what? We'll do it. Oh, no, we won't do it again. I already did it before. We went on that rant. Just draft the top 5 tight end, and you won't have to worry. You'll only have to worry about bye weeks. And who cares? Maybe your team's good enough you don't even have to take them out of the lineup. You leave them in there and you get 0 points and you say, F it, I'm too good. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching. This was an extremely long video. I talked about the Rams and the Seahawks for over an hour. It's absolutely kind of just crazy. But, it is what it is. The way I see it, just to kind of give an overview of all these teams, Goff, Gurley, Brandin Cooks, and Kupp all have immense value. Okay? When it comes to the Seahawks, Russel Wilson, Rashaad Penny, Doug Baldwin, maybe Brandon Marshall. Right? There's another 4 players. Okay? Cardinals. Don't touch the quarterbacks unless you're in 2 QB leagues. David Johnson, and Larry Fitzgerald. Right? David Johnson 3 times. Okay? Because just wait. You'll see. David Johnson, okay? And then last, Jimmy Garoppolo in 2 QB leagues. Potentially he could be a wide receiver 1, but I doubt it because there's so much wide receiver 1 talent. So Jimmy Garoppolo in 2 QB leagues. Jerrik McKinnon is an RB2. Pierre Garcon is an RB2. And Marquise Goodwin could have value in deeper leagues as a bench stash. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching. Next, we're going to be going over the AFC West next week. And, stay tuned, like, share, subscribe. Could I get another subscriber? I just need one other subscriber to make sure that people are actually watching these videos. That's all I need. Just one other subscriber. Just one person, subscribe, and we'll be good. So that I know that there's a living person that's actually watching these videos. Thank you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.